Welcome to our newest adventure for first responder wellness. No one fights alone. In-depth conversations about mental health and culture in the first responder space. We're joined by your co-hosts Austin Pedersen and Brad Shepard.
Austin, my friend, we're back again. One more podcast. How you doing, bro?
Just, you know what? I'm excited that I turned on the machine to do this and it actually worked today.
I love
So-
that. The level of anxiety had to be at best mild because that thing has been fighting you.
Oh yeah,
Fighting you.
weeks. Yeah, huge win. It's crazy when days actually go as they're supposed to. It's
Way to
it's
go,
a new
bro.
experience.
Well, I just came sliding in like I was a baseball player from my parents' house sliding into home base just now because I'm super excited about this conversation today.
Same.
We have a guest with us that I just am so looking forward to having a conversation with, Leslie Forbes. Leslie, welcome to the No One Fights Alone podcast.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Leslie is the current sitting president of the National Board of Directors for Survivors of Blue Suicide. Leslie is a retired educator of 38 years, and is the widow of Lieutenant Thomas Forbes, Groton Police Department. Did I say that correctly?
Groton City Police Department.
Groton City Police Department. And that was a 32-year marriage. And
Yeah.
Leslie, I am so happy that you're giving us your time today to tell us your story. But in the meantime, let me just point out, if the viewers aren't seeing this visually, we had a great conversation early, and you painted this picture of your house and where you lived, and the picture behind you is stunning, of vegetation. And we are 113 degrees in Oklahoma
Oof.
yesterday afternoon, and where you're sitting has to be absolutely gorgeous.
Well, it is hot and humid out there. I'll tell you right now.
Oh, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And
Well,
a little bit of interesting information about where I live. A few things. First of all, about 4 years after Tom died by suicide, I sold our family home, which we can get into later. But against almost all my friends and family's dismay, I did not buy a condo or a one-floor ranch like everyone was telling me. A widow of 32 years of being married 32 years should do. I found, I want to say, a dilapidated, built in 1890s beach house. So it's across from where the Thames River meets the Long Island Sound. And it needed so much work. But what do they say? Location, location, location. And with a lot of time and sweat, and it was probably really good for me to keep busy. I have this nice little place now that my family loves, right in Groton City, Connecticut. But we have
I love that.
right down the road, which is part of General Dynamics, where they make the submarines. So from my porch, I can see the subs go by, which is always, I don't care how many times I see it, it's so patriotic.
That's cool.
And we have the Navy base, which is further down along the river in Groton. And right across the river, we have the Coast Guard Academy. So there's a lot of neat stuff that happened in our community.
Well, that's the place to be if you're a patriot, because it sounds like you're seeing some great stuff on a daily basis. Wow.
Yeah, the water is also healing, and this was the area my husband patrolled when he was an officer. So it was almost like, in a way, moving but coming home and bringing him with me, because I have a lot of good memories of this area for when he worked here.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, I love that. That sounds like a great segue into just telling us about your husband. How about you just kick us off?
Yeah. So I always begin with, there's a part of my body that still feels, I think, the trauma of losing someone you love to suicide. Being an educator for so many years, I'm comfortable speaking in front of people, and it's just part of the profession I did for so long. but the little bit of anxiety or that trauma is still in my body. I still feel it. And so it makes me feel a little anxious, but it's also such an important, I think, story to share that I try to step out of that feeling of being uncomfortable and share it. It still feels a little surreal to me, because if you had asked me 13 years ago, is this where I would have seen my life? I would have said, no way in hell. That's not my story. That's not my life. But here I sit. So in a way, it can be anyone's story. And that's another reason why I share it. Tom and I were married in 1980. I still had a year of college left. I was student teaching. Um, he graduated and got a job with the police department, and I still had a year to go. And, our family was just, what are the two of you doing? And we were like, we're going to do this. It was, you find your person, you find your person. We met, we got engaged after 6 weeks of meeting. We got married a year later. It was all very fast. And we were committed. We were committed to our marriage, and we were committed to each other. He was a police officer in our community. And once I graduated and got my teaching certification, I was an educator. So we were both very committed to being part of our community and doing good for others. After about 3 years, our first daughter came along, and actually today is her 41st birthday.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep, her name is Gina. And 3 years later, our second daughter was born, Lauren. She just had her third baby a few weeks ago. So I now have 5 grandchildren. And
Yay,
awesome.
congratulations.
Thank you. But it's also heartbreaking because Tom has only met one of the 5. So you can see how life just goes on and keeps getting better.
Sure.
And, his absence is felt strongly, even through the most beautiful parts of life, like the birth of grandchildren.
Sure.
So we were if there is a typical normal American family, whatever that means, that was kind of us. It was a real marriage. But we were really committed to our family and to our professions. I stayed home when our daughters were young, and Tom worked a lot. He worked a lot of hours to support our family, making the decision that one of us would stay home with our daughters till they were in school full time. But he had a very successful career. If you looked at his resume, during that time, he rose through the ranks rather quickly through his promotions, and he was involved in probably everything he could be involved with. I could list a few, and like I say, it's a very impressive resume. Oh, he was a hostage negotiator. He was the commander of the dive team. He was the supervisor for I think the detective division for a while. He ended up going to the FBI NA in Quantico and graduated at close to top of his class. And oh, by the way, on the side, he got his pilot's license. So he was, cool. He was a cop's cop. He was very involved. And through all his promotions, he was there for the people that he supervised. That was important to him. And meanwhile, we're raising our daughters, and now I'm back to work. But we did everything we could to have that strong family unit. So if Tom was working a lot of second shift and wasn't home when our kids would get home from school, I'd often take the girls and we'd go to the police department and have dinner together. One of the things that used to make us laugh when our youngest daughter was probably like 6 or 7, if we were bringing Tom dinner, there was 2 ways we could get to his office. And if Daddy had customers, as she called it, we'd have to go around because we couldn't pass through the jail. If Dad had customers and there were people in the jail, we couldn't go a certain way. So every time we'd enter the PD, the first thing Lauren would say to the dispatcher is, does Dad have customers? and then she would know which way to go to have dinner together. Tom was a very, very dedicated and involved father. He had a very traumatic childhood, and it was extremely important to him that our daughters never experience what he had to go through throughout his childhood and adolescence. I think one of the things that really bonded us and that brought us together was that I came from a very strong Sicilian family where my grandmother and my mom and my aunts pretty much raised us um, like we were still in Sicily, because that's all my grandmother really knew. She didn't come to the States until she was in her 30s. And growing up, I never quite understood it until as an adult, I had a chance to go back and meet family. And then it all kind of clicked of, oh, now my childhood totally makes sense. But for Tom, it was very appealing to have a very strong family unit. And then we also created that within our own family. We chose to live close to my sister so that my children and her children, grew up close. They had family nearby. And, Tom was the go-to person. He was the strong cop that could handle anything. And my family, my extended family depended upon him, as did, myself and my daughters. You also have to learn how to be very independent, I think, too, as a wife or a spouse, I should say, of a police officer, because oftentimes you do a lot of things on your own. And you got to make that balance of keeping the marriage important, yet also being independent enough to handle a lot of things. And sometimes be that third wheel or that fifth wheel because your spouse gets called out or there's an emergency and they're always working. So we worked hard to balance that. It was a real marriage. Did we bicker? You better believe it. If I said the sky was blue, he'd say it was gray, and we could go for, hours on trying to change the other person's mind. So it wasn't a perfect marriage. It was a real marriage. We bickered, but we loved each other. We were committed. We were in this together. And we had our ups and downs, but we were really looking forward to that time of retirement. And as our daughters grew older and kind of left the nest, there's always that adjustment. And we were like, oh, how's this going to be for us? And what we found is when the last daughter was out on her own, she was in college at the time, living away from home, and our older daughter had married and was living in Maine. We were like, wow, it was like a second honeymoon in a way. We really felt we enjoyed that time together. It's like we didn't have to wait up and worry for that garage door to come up because we didn't know what the heck they were doing. They were now on their own. We weren't as worried about them, and we could kind of date again. With that said, though, in the back of Tom's mind, his retirement would be based upon his last 3 years. So he worked a lot. He worked a lot of hours. Because of his childhood, he always had a fear financially. We were not as stable as I think we were. He always had a lot of anxiety about money, which then caused me to have a little bit of anxiety. And it wasn't until, honestly, after he died and I was on my own that I realized we were really in a good place. It's just in the back of his mind, it was something that always fed his anxiety. So he had a lot of anxiousness about retiring and what was to come. Oh, so now, he's about a couple of months from his retirement. Less than a year prior to that, he had gone to the FBI NA and just had a phenomenal experience. It was an international one. So he met some really wonderful people from around the world. His roommate was from Pakistan. Another close friend was from the Netherlands. And due to the fact that when they had time off, they obviously couldn't go home, Tom would bring them to our house. So I had such a wonderful experience getting to meet and know them as well. But it was probably one of the highlights of his, I think, police career at that time. And one of the things I do remember is him sharing with me someone spoke at the academy while he was there on police suicide. And this person had actually come through and was in a better place and was sharing his experience with others, which was somewhat very, very new, because in the 1980s and 90s, during most of Tom's career, suicide was not talked about. We never talked about it as a couple. There was never anything shared with spouses. It just, it just wasn't spoken. It just wasn't talked about at all.
Sure, of
So
course.
for him to talk about that was like, oh, yeah, okay. And the first thing he said to me was, oh man, you never have to worry about me. That will never be a road I take. That was less than a year before he did die by suicide. So hindsight, all those things that I look back and I can see some things happening that just didn't make sense to me at the time. So I guess the picture I'm trying to paint right now is we had a pretty typical American family, two people married, raising kids type of life. And
Sure.
and his career was good. His career, he did a lot of neat things. He was very involved with the community, did a lot of programs for our families in need, I think connecting to what he had growing up. And we had our first grandson born, which he was gaga over. It was like, icing on the cake for him. He thought being a dad was great. Well, being a grandfather was just the best. So let's say this is like February or March now. And he starts worrying about retirement. And the first thing I noticed was he couldn't sleep at night. So he really struggled with insomnia. And it was bad. I mean, he really couldn't sleep at night. And so he spoke to his medical doctor. And, the first thing they wanted to do, of course, was prescribe sleeping pills. But he felt he couldn't take them because he was always on call. Leading up to this, he was the acting chief while his chief was out on physical disability. And so being in that position as acting chief and his regular position as lieutenant with no deputy chief, it was just chief lieutenant. So Tom was second in command at time, acting as chief and part of the detective division. So he was getting those calls frequently. They would have to check in with him, or it could be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I guess he just knew that if he took any type of sleeping aid, he wouldn't be of sound mind to be able to respond to these kind of calls. So he did not take any of the prescribed medications. So now he's not sleeping at all. And he's starting to have a lot of anxiety. He had a few incidences where kind of tipped the scale for him. And one I remember happened was that an elderly person had passed away and was probably in the home for maybe a week, maybe 10 days. I'm not quite sure how long, but a neighbor finally called to do a well check, and the officer found that he had passed away. And so he called my husband, and Tom was like, you know what, I'll meet you there. And he said, it was a hard scene. It was hard to be part of when somebody has passed away and it's been a few days, let's say a week and a half. So one of the officers there was having a little bit of trouble, and he said, go, I'll stay. I'll be here till we take care of everything. And that night when he came home, he kept showering and he kept saying, I just can't get, the smell out of my nose. I can't get it out of my nose. And my response was, you're okay. My goodness, you've been through so much worse. I don't think I have to list for anyone the things that police officers deal with on a daily basis. And they just accumulate, after year after year after year. And he had so many other traumatizing times that were definite, or I should say that felt to me more traumatizing than this one,
Sure.
that
Right.
my response was kind of like, you got this. You're retiring in a little bit. This is the end of your
Yeah.
career. Let's just slide into retirement, not knowing how much it was deeply affecting him. Um, I did not know that he actually did go and spoke to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I know it was important for him not to go to anyone local, because at that time it was still, you hid that. Um, Even though I have to tell you, Tom had counseled a few of his officers that he felt might have post traumatic stress disorder to get help and to make sure they got the help they needed. For himself, was a little bit more difficult.
And just to frame that out, Leslie, 2011, is that correct? When he
2011.
right?
Yeah.
So for our listeners to frame out kind of that time frame that you were referencing was 2011. Sorry,
No peer support.
keep going, please.
Yeah, no peer
Right,
support.
right. Very, very minimal, if any at all.
Very minimal. Tom did not get along well with the mayor. There was a lot of politics that they bumped heads on, because Tom felt at the time things that were trying to get passed through weren't good for the police department or the police officers. And so he was very vocal about it. And so kind of made his life a little bit difficult. I don't want to, Tom's relationship with the chief wasn't great. That's all I'll say. They did not have a great
Sure.
relationship.
Sure. I think you're painting
Yeah.
a
So
very
he didn't have anyone to
good
go
picture
to,
there.
and
Sure.
whereas some of the officers turned to Tom, I don't think Tom knew where to turn. And like many people, I think, that have been in law enforcement many years, especially 13 years ago, you man up, you face it,
Right.
and you don't ask
Keep
for
going.
you don't ask for help. However, he did see someone that I found out afterwards, and they did diagnose him with post-traumatic stress disorder, and they prescribed some medication. And I did see, he brought home some medication, and I asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh, I just saw my, physician because I'm not sleeping," and kind of brushed over it. And he started to, I believe, take them, but he started to become very paranoid about silly thing, not silly, I shouldn't say that. He became very paranoid about he was going to retire, what would we do financially? Well, his pension was really good at this point because he had worked, actually, he probably killed himself working all those hours. And he kept saying, you're going to leave me. It just wasn't making sense of why I would leave him. And I couldn't convince him different. So I saw some paranoia, but I'm talking a week or two. I noticed at night, if he was sleeping, he started to have a lot of movements that he couldn't control. And I mentioned that to him. And our in the so the 6th, I don't know what's going on, but you have this prescription. You seem to be having some side effects. You need to call your doctor. And he said, absolutely. And he made his lunch. And we had plans to go out that night to a retirement party for some educators that I worked with. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous day. So I went for a run at a local place, a local state park, and then I would go into work. And oftentimes we would run together. But this morning he went off, he made his lunch. He went into his office, and I went for a run. And I texted him, "Oh my goodness, what a beautiful morning. Now I'm heading into, my classroom." And I didn't hear back from him, which was kind of unusual. But again, who knows what they're up to, what happens on their calls. So I didn't think anything of it. But that's when he made a very quick decision of, went into his office, and he went into a closet and shut the door and shot himself. And somewhere between like 7 and 8 in the morning. And one of his colleagues, they heard a noise, but they didn't know quite what it was, but they didn't think anything of it, I guess. I'm not even sure. I just know his colleagues found him shortly after that.
Sorry for your loss, Leslie.
Thank you.
If we back up there a little bit in that the front end of this story, because I know there's some great parts of your story are from here forward, but I don't want to minimize it all, your loss. So this is your bravery and courage to actually share your story is we're honored by that. But if we back
Absolutely.
up here a little bit, I hear you saying you're seeing some things. You're seeing some things that probably in 2011 nobody knew that those things were red flags, or nobody knew. Is that what I hear you saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Well, it wasn't
I
shared.
feel like I'm hearing some of that.
Yeah, I think it just, honest to goodness, his whole career, suicide was never mentioned. I mean, we were, part of the police family. No one talked about it. So in hindsight now, and we've come so far, I think, in understanding mental illness, especially with law enforcement and the military, that now with hindsight, I can see some signs, absolutely. At the time, I had no reference,
Sure.
nothing to pin it to other than he's not sleeping. He's having some kind of reaction to a medication, I believe. He started to have some paranoia that didn't make sense to me. But this is
Sure.
within a 2-week span. It was that quick. The insomnia was a little bit longer, but that kind of his spiral, it was almost like he was good until he wasn't good. And never in the back of my mind did I ever think he would take his own life. So he never mentioned it. He never talked to me about how deep the anxiety or maybe the depression was. We did find a journal afterwards, my daughters and I, and it was very specific in that you could really then see him spiraling down this rabbit hole that he couldn't get himself out of. But again, it was just like this 2-week period where he just couldn't get himself out of, I guess I will call it maybe the depression, or I'm not even sure at that point it was suicide ideation, because I'm not sure. He never said anything about taking his own life or feeling like life wasn't worth living. He always expressed his love for me and our daughters and our grandson, and that never changed. So he never withdrew from us. He was still with his daughters, close with them, talking on the phone with them. It was just this very quick turnaround of something snapped. Something snapped. And whether it's it's mental illness that he was carrying for a while, and the accumulation of trauma or stress for all those years, and it just seemed to happen right before his retirement, or whatever medication they put him on. I did afterwards, my daughters and I researched it, and it's a pretty heavy duty tranquilizer that does cause suicide ideation, as well as people that take it can sometimes have things happen that they don't remember. And my first thought was, and the man carried a gun, and someone thought it was okay, I guess, to prescribe that. So I'm not really, I can't speak 100% what was the turning point or a tipping scale, but it was just very, very
Sure.
quick. And now in hindsight, yes, the paranoia would have been one.
Right.
The insomnia was another one. And
Well, I would assume that if he was diagnosed with PTSD, that there was probably more symptoms that maybe at that moment in time you weren't privy to. He
Yeah, he was
probably
hiding.
more than likely wasn't sharing with you,
Exactly.
either intent.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
Internal.
internalizing
Yeah.
either intentionally or unintentionally to protect you
Right.
and his family. I mean, listen, you've painted a picture of this man loved his family. And there's no doubt just the way you, especially grandchildren, and and uh, in that moment of time, he became overwhelmed and made an impulsive but lasting
Yeah.
decision
Yeah.
in that. And I think for our listeners, again, I'm thank you for honoring us with your story. But I think for the for the listening audience, I think it's important to note that this uh, type of PTSD or anxiousness or sleepless nights in conjunction with the occupation that of trauma that we encounter on a daily basis is not to be taken lightly. I mean, all these things are to be paid attention to, and maybe some of
Absolutely.
them mean something, maybe they don't. But if you internalize it and don't ask those questions, then you uh, have a far greater chance of doing something very detrimental to yourself or your loved ones. Is
Absolutely.
that fair?
Oh, that's very fair. That's very fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the support was so
Well,
minimal back then.
sure. And we're talking about 2011 when
Right.
peer support really wasn't even a thing
Right.
yet. I mean, it was around, but it really wasn't. I was still on the job then, and peer support was just growing. I know, Oklahoma is far removed from Connecticut, but as a nation in law enforcement and first responder industry, it was very new. So
Yeah.
I think
Different
from
world.
from
Yeah.
here, Leslie, and I don't want to ignore anything that you want to share, but if we kind of keep moving, what what was your growth since then? Because you're doing something very brave. You're telling a story of hurt and loss and pain, and you're sitting here sharing it with a motive that we'll get to in a minute, which is your national board seat and what you represent there. But what about your growth since then? I mean, do you mind walking us through a little bit of that and just how you got back up and stood on your own 2 feet and through some of that? Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. So 2011, there was no support for families whatsoever. So when Tom died by suicide at the police department in his office, it's extremely public. The news cameras were there, I think, even before they could get to the school and start, and let me know. So there's no support for families. At that time, there was no support for his colleagues. The community as a whole kind of goes into shock, besides the trauma my family and I experienced. And it is trauma. It's post-traumatic stress disorder for family members that are survivors of our law enforcement that take their lives by suicide. So that first year, you're in shock. The only thing I could think of was I was a mom and I was a grandmother. And I knew I had to survive for them. And it's like living in this deep abyss that you just have to claw yourself out of. I remember thinking it hurt to breathe. As soon as you start to claw your way out, something else happens. It's like whack-a-mole. You start to come out and you get whacked back down, and it's a hard road to walk. I was so blessed in that I have 2 sisters, and they surrounded me and my daughters. I have some very close friends that did the same. The police department, and I understand this in that they were grieving, they were in shock, they didn't know how to respond. I think some were angry with Tom. So we didn't have a lot of contact with them. One person in particular, who's still a very close friend, and I'm friends with his wife as well. They did stay as like part of our tribe, I want to say, because my daughters and I just kind of stayed, kind of hunkered down together over the summer and supported each other. But it's hell. I don't even know how to put it into words. It's just hell. I was, raised Catholic. I taught in Catholic schools for 17 years before I went to public schools. Both my daughters went through Catholic education, K through 12th. And yet I wasn't angry with God, but I did pull away.
Yeah.
Going to church was so emotional for me that I felt like I would break down and I couldn't keep myself together. So I stopped going to church because I literally, sometimes mass is so moving anyways, but just being so fragile, I just couldn't hold it together. And my thought was, you just have to hold it together. So I was blessed with people that were my angels. And I did a lot of reading then. Anything I could get my hands on, I read. But it's a very lonely and very isolating feeling to have someone you love die by suicide, because people want answers. And they want to know why, or they want to have a reason. And I think one of the most hurtful things was there are many instances, but I would bump into someone and they would say, I'm so sorry, which thank you. But they would say, we don't blame you. And that was like, oh, because at first I didn't blame myself. And I was like, but people kept saying, we don't blame you. And so I started, am I to blame? And so I went through a period of, what did I do? I should have seen it. All those things that, why didn't I see it coming? So you go into that whole guilt that is very common with.
Well, the natural basis for that statement is you were to blame.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
in turn is them backing up and saying, okay, we're not going to blame you.
Right.
And I can't help but think, Leslie, that this is exacerbated. There's two things that I think that I'd like to actually point out or maybe offer up as perspective. And you tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but one is that he took his life in the police department, and with a police officer, it's a trusted servant, and it becomes a member of their community. And it's almost like the community says, that person's mine. That's my guy. And you already said that he was very involved in the community. When I looked up some of the stuff, it was something related to youth programs, I think, if I remember right. Something. Am I close? It's been a minute since I looked at. But the other thing that I think is outside your control in this grieving process is the media connect. I mean, you said that the media had showed up almost immediately. So now they know no bounds. They are invasive and intrusive on almost a criminal level, unapologetically. So I cannot imagine the having to walk this path very publicly.
Very
So if you have to
publicly.
go to the store, people are seeing you and having these conversations. And I would probably guess some of these people, you don't even know who they are, but they knew your husband. So they
Right.
feel like they know you.
Right.
And they feel like they have
Mm.
permission
Good
to
point.
address you or talk to you. And reality, they don't even know you.
And
Am I hitting close
yeah,
in
you
this?
are. And I think too, it's human nature to want answers, because by the grace of God, I guess, it could, and that's kind of my story with Tom and why I share it is that from the outside looking in, it looked like he had it all: a loving
Sure.
family, an excellent career in,
Yeah.
policing, and yet he died by suicide. There was no alcoholism within the past. There wasn't a scandal with financial means. There was no other people in our marriage. It was just him and I. But even a close colleague of mine, when I finally went back to teach, um, it might have been like 6 months had passed, and she said, "You really didn't see it coming." And part of me wants to say, "Sure, I did, and I did nothing about it," to be sarcastic. But the other part is like, really, yeah, my husband of 32 years, if I saw it coming, I absolutely would have tried everything in my power to help him. But I'm also very, I guess I'm very empathetic to others, and I also know people say things. I never took it personal, I guess. I had to step back and not take things personally, because some people that said things that were hurtful were also grieving or trying to find answers, and they have to find their own way. So I just decided I was going to honestly stand tall, not let any of that get to me, dig my way out of this abyss so that my daughters and I and my grandson can still have a life, and a life that's not just full of grief. However, that's a long journey. So I'm now 13 years out, but those first 3, 4 years, they're just hell. And you somehow get through them. For me, it was running. I did a lot of running. I knew by how many miles I did, like what kind of pain I was in. And I know one summer day, I just went out and I stopped and I was like, holy shit, I'm 13 miles from home. I got to run back. Like, that's a freaking marathon. And I didn't even have water with me because I
Yeah.
just would go out and I would do a lot of my, I think, processing while I was running. So to get myself back, I went to the local McDonald's and I begged for water. There was somebody watering their lawn, like another few miles down the road, and I asked them for water, and I got myself home. But at that time, running kind of helped me survive the trauma my body was going through, because I think it was easier for my body to hurt or be completely exhausted than to process exactly, my husband's suicide and the loss, him not being in my life anymore. Like I said, I did a lot of reading. I personally did a lot of journaling. In the past, if I kept a journal, I think I would censor it, because, you're always supposed to be the best wife you can be, the best teacher you can be, the best mom you can be. That's just kind of, I think, put upon a lot of people in their lives, or maybe the best cop you can be, whatever you are. And so I would sometimes censor. And after Tom died, I didn't censor at all. I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I literally still have like 40 volumes of journals that, when you couldn't stand it anymore, I would write instead of, I guess, scream. I would get it down, and so I did a lot of journaling. So through my own process, I learned what were my triggers, and I learned how to get myself out of some of those most desperate moments. And I kind of just learned through trial and error. The running was helping, the journaling was helping, being with people that cared about me, surrounding myself by people that love and cared for me. Teaching was really my passion. So getting back into the classroom was actually healing for me as well. I was teaching 7th grade English language arts at the time. And what a surprise, we did a lot of writing that year. And I think it was healing for me, and it was helpful to my students at that time. So I just kind of tried to figure out
I know
the hell to get through it.
I know what an incredible story. That picture of you running 13 miles and getting lost in your pain, that says
Yeah.
that word picture says volumes about how a
Yeah.
literal
Literal marathon.
marathon
Yeah.
of you
Yeah.
just surrendering to the pain in that moment of and of putting it into running. That picture just is incredible for me. But I think I know where we're going is this connecting with other survivors of blue suicide. But in this time frame that you're talking about, did any survivors of suicide had you connected with anybody up to this point, or did you know anybody that had been in a similar place as what your life was?
I reached out to different groups that they had for families of suicide survivors, and I attended a few, and it was almost worse because no one had a spouse that died by blue suicide. And I remember being in a group where one person lost her brother and she was blaming the police. Died because
Hmm.
he had to
Mm.
kill. The police did this, the police did
Right,
this.
right.
And then there were some parents, which, oh my gosh, my heart grieves for any parent out there because the loss of a child to suicide is so traumatic as well. But no one had my experience. And I felt um, I would leave feeling worse than better. I felt more lonely, more lost, um, looking in the mirror and going, I don't know who the hell you are because, you're 52 and your husband died by suicide and now you're a widow. And like, what does that mean? So I really did not have anyone that I knew or who reached out or any of the groups I reached out to. It wasn't for blue suicide. And I was the only one. And when I shared, when they said, how did you lose your loved one? And I started to share, it all became like, oh my God, I read about that in the paper. You're his wife. And that was hard. I felt like I had this neon sign that said, yes, I'm her.
Yeah.
I did have one instance that when I first went back to teaching, I had a young girl, 7th grade girl, sitting in my classroom, and her dad had died by suicide, not law enforcement, but within the last 6 months. And the mom had come and discussed with me her concerns for her daughter, knowing what her daughter went through. And I went, I got it. I got her. And I was like, I don't know if you know this, but my husband died by suicide. And she hadn't known that because they were kind of new to the area. I felt like she was placed in my classroom by, the hand of God.
Sure.
And there was a
Yeah.
reason.
There's a reason. Yeah.
And my nurturing toward her, you help others, you help yourself. But I just made sure I had her back, that whole year. I can only imagine at 12, what your life is like. And I could relate because I had my daughters at the time who were a little older in their 20s, but also the loss of their dad. And they had nowhere to turn as well. So I wish I could have grieved for my daughters, but you can't. You can't grieve for your children. They have to grieve themselves, but that's a hard road for a parent too. So there's really no support. So I know what that's like. I know what it's like to live through that and to try to get yourself out of this abyss and to try to move on with life, and still be a part of, a purposeful part of your community, be an educator, be a mom, be a friend, all of that, be a grandmother, with zero support. I tried a lot of therapy, a lot of different therapists. The first one, the police department arranged for myself and my daughters because this person was trained in police suicide. He wasn't very warm and cuddly though, and that worked for my daughter, but it didn't really work for me. But I do remember him saying he reached out to the chief and offering his services, and the chief said, no, thank you, we're fine. Which I know, no, thank you. How can you be fine? Your officer died.
Wait, what?
In your police department. No, thank you. We're fine. We got this. Again, this is 2011. And then through the years, I tried different therapists, and some clicked and some didn't. But my life really didn't change, or I thought I was in a good place. Let's just say that. The years went by, more grandchildren were born. Um, we survived my younger daughter's marriage. And I say survived because there was such a hole. There was so much pain and sadness when she got married because she wanted the traditional wedding in the church, but it was so painful for her to do without her dad. So they
Sure,
had a
of course.
destination wedding. We brought his ashes. And there's so much joy and there's so much pain. And this is kind of like the mesh of our life, the joy with the pain, the happiness with the tears. So that's why I say we survived her wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. But his ashes came with us, and his uniform sat on a chair. Those life moments are more difficult and hard at times. Same with the birth of every grandchild. But so I thought I was doing good because I was handling all the stuff. I financially, here's another thing. So after Tom died, they just cut off his pay and they're like, sorry, suicide, nothing, no pension, nothing. And another police officer called me and he's like, sit down, you're going to call this lawyer, you're going to fight for Tom's pension. So I did. And it took about 2.5 to 3 years. But within that time, I paid the mortgage, I paid the car payments, like I kept our life stable, going from Tom, who pretty much made the most money with his overtime, on just my paycheck alone all of a sudden. And, it cost me like $35,000 with this lawyer, but in the end, and I'm not supposed to talk about it, they did sign and I got a part of his pension. And the first one they presented to me was based on his pay without overtime. So at least I was of sound mind to say, and my lawyer wanted me to sign that. And I was like, oh, hell no. The whole reason Tom worked those 3 years was so it would be based upon his last 3 years. And I mean, it changed it by thousands of dollars. It wasn't just a few. So, they went back to the drawing board. And finally, and this wasn't the police department, this was the city, the city clerk or treasurer said, okay, we'll agree to this amount. It's not the full amount, but it was an amount I could agree to as long as you never speak of it and tell anybody else. And I was like, hell, why? Because if another person died by suicide, you don't want to support their family. So I do talk about it. They haven't come after me yet, but I'm supposed to not mention that I was able to get a part of his pension because he died by suicide.
I'm proud of you for bringing it up. I don't wish you any ill with that interaction, but these conversations need to be had, and I applaud your bravery in doing it. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to express all of this. And so my point is that, I think I told you I bought this house and I just put all my energy into renovating it. So I kept myself really busy. I think that's what I did. I didn't give myself time to think back and relax. I just kept going and not thinking and just basically surviving. So fast forward, it's been about 9-10 years, and I get a call from Shelley Jones and Laurie Putnam saying, your name was given to us and we're starting a group called Survivors of Blue Suicide. And if you'll fill out these forms, we'll get back to you. And so I did. And they said, yeah, we'd like you to join, but it's COVID. We're going to have our first Zoom meeting. And I almost didn't go because it started to feel like I was picking at a scab and I didn't know where I was going with this. And I thought, okay, well, what do I have to lose? So I went on, and this is the very first Zoom of SBS. And Laurie said, I want everyone to go around and just say your name, your spouse's name. At the time, it was just spouses on this one. Your spouse's name, their end of watch. And she got to me and I couldn't even speak. And I was like, oh boy. Like I couldn't even get my name out or Tom's name or the end of what. And I'm like, man, I'm keeping a lot inside. You know, here I thought I was doing so well. And I realized I can't. And so a while and I got it out, but it was very insightful for me to see. And then I felt like I was ill. So after that first meeting, I felt sick to my stomach. And that was the sign that I really wasn't dealing with it. I looked to the outside world like I had it going on. I was teaching, you know, I was doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. But inside, I was still so, I think, a mess. So that was kind of the beginning of a light bulb that said, there's something else going inside of you. And so I kind of opened up to SBS and I started to attend their Zooms. And to say it was life-changing, it was life-changing for me. You know, I was the one on the Zoom that was the furthest out. Some people were 6 weeks. Some people were, I think the most was 4 or 5 years. And here I'm being like, it was 10 years. And to have, first of all, to not have to say anything, but to know how somebody feels. We all grieve differently. We all have our different grief journey. But with that said, you get it. We all have so many similar experiences as far as the stigma of suicide, feeling isolated, and trying to get through that grief journey that's different than no other, I think, type of death. So the bonding that happened, the support, and then Laurie and Shelley started to bring in counselors with us. And I just found them so helpful. And I also found that as I shared Tom's story and I shared where I was starting to give hope to others. And people were saying, just seeing you as part of this and where you are in your life, it gives me hope that I can get through the next day. And so that to me is still why I do it. So that beginning of Survivors of Blue Suicide was really, truly life-changing. You don't feel you're a part of the world where people die from cancer or from car accidents, and you're not part of COPS, the Care of Police Survivors, because up until a few years ago, that was very separate. And there's a strong message of you're not invited to our group. And I understand it. And there's nothing negative. I'm not putting anybody down for anything that's been in the past. What they do for survivors of family is beautiful. It's amazing. We've had people on the Groton City Police Department that lost their spouse and their father, and cops came in and just surrounded that family with love, financial means, support. And, you know, it continues to this day. And that is so needed and so wonderful. But my husband was a police officer for 32 years, same sacrifices, gave his life, and he died by suicide. And it was null and void. It was like, there is no Lieutenant Tom Forbes. And the Forbes family, you're just out on your own, and we're sorry, but there's nothing we can do. So for Shelley and Laurie to branch off and to start this group for survivors of Blue Suicide, I mean, they're my angels, and they changed my life. They changed my life. Since then, I went back to therapy and did EMDR because I think I was finally strong enough to actually face it and deal with it. In the past, I was afraid to go too deep because I had to keep myself going. I had to keep myself afloat. I couldn't let my brain go to that death of despair or that death of pain. Being part of SBS and the support I got and the counselors there, just totally amazing. I felt strong enough to go and do EMDR, which was also life-changing for me. So now I'm in a place where I can share Tom's story. Um, I hope it gives hope to other survivors because I do have joy in my life. Tom's suicide will never go away. It's always there. I don't think there's one day I don't think of that man. There's not one day that I don't think of him. But there's also a lot of joy in my life. And I can still see the beauty that life has, and I can see the love that's there, and I can give that love back. And so that's kind of where I am in my journey right now.
Leslie, I love that. And if I can be so bold, I think you're sharing the story brings about such a great opportunity to brag on Tom's life and all the great things that he did, and your beautiful children and grandchildren as well. So, and I want to segue back into survivors of blue suicide. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing your story. But I want to drill down just for a second on this Survivors Blue Suicide piece, because what a powerful organization. And you painted such a great picture of Concerns of Police Survivors and that growth, and how Survivors of Blue Suicide has grown into being and now is connecting survivors of blue suicide all across the United States, uh, and highlighting Shelley and Lori and what amazing two human beings those people are. I've known them both for years, and Lori is just an amazing human. But if there are listeners out here who are disconnected, and maybe you don't even know it, just like you said, you didn't realize how much you still had inside of you that needed to get out. And maybe there are people out here who are listening or know of somebody who can listen to this podcast and say, hey, give this a try. Or maybe connect with Survivors of Blue Suicide and ensure that your life can now, you're not leaving your loved one behind. You're actually growing into uh, a, place of peace and gratitude and serenity that you may not even know exists, which is, I feel like, what you just described a little bit of
And
you
acceptance.
you thought you were there.
Yeah,
And acceptance,
and accept
absolutely,
it's like
yes.
an
Yes,
acceptance of,
acceptance.
okay, this is my life. Um, I want to say too, the growth of blue suicide, the survivors of blue suicide, is it's not just spouses anymore. Um, Parents, adult children, colleagues, and that's probably one of our largest growing group, is reaching out and getting colleagues to be a part of it as well. And so through Survivors of Blue Suicide, we still have monthly Zooms. Once a month, they will have a trained counselor on that will talk to a specific aspect of suicide and grief and healing. And at other times, it's just a support group. So it might be just spouses, it might be just parents, it might just be colleagues. At other times, we're all together. It's only another person that has lost someone they love to suicide can really offer and understand. And that's a huge part of it. That feeling of isolation and being the only person in the world who have ever experienced this is gone. And hearing all the other stories and knowing you're just not alone, it changes things. It changes things. And I think it makes that grief journey, as hard as it is, just a little bit more doable, to help people also get to that point of peace and acceptance. And I also want to add that they have retreats, and the retreats also are specific to the surviving person, whether spouse, adult children, colleague. I just went to one recently in June at St. Crispin's Retreat Center. And this one was for spouses, but we also included two adult children because we didn't have enough for them on their own to have their own retreat. So they were brought into our group. June 6th, it was 13 years for me, the anniversary of Tom's suicide. And the retreat was June 7th through the 12th. So I went saying, okay, I can be of support to everybody. This is great. You know, how can I help others? Not thinking I'm going to get anything out of it. And life-changing for me. I recognized I still carried things that I didn't even know was there. And one of the things I really struggled with was guilt. And I left that retreat, leaving my guilt there and having so much more peace in my heart. That's 13 years in my journey. So these retreats are so worthwhile, so supportive. I can't encourage survivors enough to participate, not only in our Zooms, but at least one retreat, at least once, to get the services they provide, because it was amazing.
And I love that you're giving this plug, because I really think it's important for people to know not just what the resource is, but what some of the programs that they have to offer. If somebody wanted to get a hold of this, how would they find Survivors of Blue Suicide?
So, you know, they can go on the website of survivorsofbluesuicide.org, or they can contact, do you have my email available to put up afterwards? They can contact me.
I
It's
don't
like
have it handy.
Leslie.Forbes at National SBS. Yep. I can also give you my phone number to add to this, and they can contact Shelley or Lori. Those are our go-to people.
Right.
So we do have a website specifically for survivors of blue suicide. Phone numbers are also listed. So phone calls, emails, whatever makes them comfortable. What happens right now is when we lose another officer to blue suicide, which sadly is still happening frequently, we've come a very long way. Police departments now talk about mental illness. They're trying to put in programs to support mental illness, so we don't get to the point where, you know, Tom felt he had no other option but to die by suicide. There's peer support. I travel and do the trauma and law enforcement conferences with Brent Newman. All of these are new and being implemented, but that SBS is specifically, you know, for people, survivors of a blue suicide. So if you have, if you have my number, put it in. If you have, or add it.
I will plug that in. If that's what you're asking, I'll plug it in,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about it offline, but I don't mind plugging that in. But in the meantime, anyone can go to survivorsofbluesuicide.org
Yes.
and find out or apply. They can find out about programs. They can find out about retreats. They can find out about mission, and they can get connected and plugged in, or they can even have a contact us if they want to reach out from Lori. And then in the meantime, when we post this podcast, it should be out in the next week or two. We'll put your email and phone number in it.
Great.
Thank you for that so much, Leslie. This has been a painful journey, but a joy nonetheless, and a true honor to have you on and tell us Tom's story and your story. And thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you.
Chateau Health and Wellness is a 16-bed treatment facility nestled in the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains in Midway, Utah. Chateau's first responder resiliency program is designed to treat the unique challenges and issues that first responders encounter in the course of their careers. Chateau's comprehensive and highly individualized approach to treatment addresses more than just the presenting issues. It addresses the why. Each of their seasoned, trauma-trained, and culturally competent therapists utilize evidence-based, specialized therapies to treat trauma at its core and enable clients to begin the healing process while developing a resilient and healthy relationship with stress. Chateau Health and Wellness is trusted by departments and agencies from around the country to treat responders and veterans. In fact, It is one of only a handful of facilities nationwide that is vetted and approved to treat members of the Fraternal Order of Police. For more information or to speak to a representative, go to chateaurecovery.com or call 888-507-5031.